Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and today we're going to be talking about Warhammer the Old World and, yes, those short, stunty dwarves. Finally, we have announcements on their release. So taking a look at the Warhammer Community website, we can see there hasn't been a Warhammer the Old World post since the 20th of April until Sunday the 14th of July. A huge gap on any news around Warhammer the Old World, and that is absolutely no doubt due to the release of Age of Sigmar, the run up to that, and the wish that Games Workshop didn't want to have any impact on Age of Sigmar. So not unexpected, but 20th of April, that was a long time ago for essentially a game system that hasn't been out that long, and we've been waiting to hear about the dwarves. There's currently only 3 factions that have been properly released: Bretonnia, Tomb Kings, and the Orcs and Goblins. So let's take a look and see what it says. So this is on the Sunday preview page of the Warhammer Community. So we've got the Dwarven Arcane Journal here, and it says we've got 3 named characters, all 3 of whom were also at large during the era of Karl Franz, so these will be known characters to us, and a host of special units, including the legendary Goblin Hewer, which is really cool, recently made its way into the Warhammer Total War, which is pretty cool, and more Dogs of War options, which is also interesting. There are 2 armies of infamy, as all the other arcane journals, allowing you to field a royal clan and an expeditionary force, as well as new runes and runic tattoos for the Slayers. That sounds pretty cool. Right, so the Dwarfen Mountain Holds Battalion, what do you get? So in the battalion box, you get a solid battle line with 32 dwarf warriors, which, to be honest, if you've watched my Dwarven faction focus on core units, they're okay, but to be honest, is something I would rarely take. So that kind of the box, not the best for me. But 32 dwarf quarrelers, they're brilliant. Love dwarf quarrelers, think they're excellent. And you can also build them as thunderers as well, so you have that choice. So definitely that part of the box pretty good. And you also get the opportunity to have 2 gyrocopters, which can also be changed to gyro bombers. Personally, not a fan of the bombers, but I do really like gyrocopters. They're excellent. So a good portion of that box, absolutely, in my view, absolutely critical to most dwarf army lists. And the Dwarven warriors, you can fit them in there, and they do make for the cheapest battle line core units in a Dwarven army. They're not bad, right? They do still do pretty well for those base units. As expected, you're going to get transfer sheet, we're going to get Dwarven dice, and also some reference cards if you can get your hands on them. It's a nightmare with this fear of missing out because they don't bloody reprint them. The Dwarven dice there, I'm not a huge fan of the way those dice look. I've got tons of dice anyway, but yeah, that look, not particularly my favourite. The details look pretty muted on it. Right, so Ungrim Iron Fist. Everybody, I'm sure, who's been involved with Warhammer Fantasy at some point, or even the Total Warhammer games, will know this guy, the Slayer King of Karak Kadrin. The Slayer King's back, ready to hack up the meanest, ugliest monsters he can find. And Ungrim Iron Fist is a legendary dwarf character represented here in his earlier years, but still wielding the mighty axe of Dargo and wearing the Slayer crown. So a particularly lethal fighter who can slay powerful enemies outright with a lucky roll. This miniature is made from forged wood resin. He actually looks really cool. I love the way he looks. I think this is a great looking miniature. I think it absolutely captures the essence of Ungrim. So yeah, that's really cool. I like that a lot. Dwarf Lords with Shield Bearers, and I really do like the Shield Bearer option on the Dwarf Lords. So you get most respected Dwarf Lords carried a top heavy shields. This pack of plastic dwarf characters contains a Thane on foot and a king carried by 3 dedicated bodyguards with interchangeable weapons, allowing one to wield a hand weapon and shield while the other swings a hefty great weapon. That's pretty cool. So I love the shield bearers from a rule perspective. I actually really do quite like this miniature, the way the king's standing on top of it, and it does actually make sense. Rather than tactical rock in the middle of a formation, this actually makes sense. You've got your formation, your bodyguard, maybe, you know, your rocking hammerers, and your king's in there, but, you know, he's standing higher than the rest of the unit. It makes sense because he stood on the shield rather than some giant rock that's appeared in the middle of the unit. So I really love this, really love the aesthetic, and the fact you get a Thane as well, that's great. Though, of course, for me, if I'm taking a Thane, I really do like to make him a battle standard bearer. So we've got a Dwarf Thane here with a handgun on Oath Stone. Okay, so that's cool. The Oath Stone makes sense, right? Because, you know, it's part of an option, you know, war gear option essentially for him. So it's less the tactical rock, you know, it's clearly an Oath Stone. But he does have a handgun, not my preference of choice for a weapon for the Dwarf Thane. So I actually prefer the Thane you get above. But still there and nice to have options. This one coming from also Forge World Resin. I think the miniature looks great. It's just the weapon isn't particularly one I like to choose for my Thanes. Right, classic dwarf characters in here. So you've got your classic ones. Okay, that's good. So runesmiths, engineers. I do like engineers. I do tend to take quite a few war machines. So engineers always good. Dwarf command set with 3 resin miniatures. That gives you a Thane as a battle standard, a king on foot, and a Slayer of Legend. So I mean, pretty good, but there you can see they are, you know, you compare that to that Ungrim above and the quality of that, you know, these, you can see they are of an older style, so it depends if you're okay with that. You've got Dragon Slayer or Demon Slayer, and then you've got Slayer command set with Musician, Battle Standard, 2 alternate Slayers. I'm not a huge fan of Slayers or Slayers rules, let alone how they look. I don't, you know, Ungrim I think looks really cool. These Slayers, I mean, it's a classic look, but in terms of the rules, I'm not the biggest fan of Slayers overall. It's just not how I like to build my lists, preferring the sort of more heavily armoured troops in the dwarf list. So what else have we got? We've got legions of dependable and durable troops. These classic kits are a great way to bulk out a burgeoning force. We've got warriors and slayers. Well, yeah, okay. Hammerers, love hammerers. I think they look really cool. Obviously, limitations on how you put them in the list, but love hammerers. Iron breakers, amazing. Expensive, but amazing. Really tough and really cool. Quarrelers as well, which can also be built as thunderers. So, you know, pretty good. Here's your quarrelers, you know, here's your iron breakers here. You know, all the things you would need if you know, I've got a couple of sample, and these are just sample fun to play lists, not meta competitive on my Dwarven faction focus. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff in here that fits into that list. So that looks pretty good. Classic dwarf mercenaries, not for me, but there if you want them. So you've got imperial dwarfs if you want to add them as a contingent for your empire lists. Cray slayers, the doom seekers are also return to battle, so that's interesting. Okay, yeah, not for me, but it's nice to have the options for people. We've got grudge thrower in here. We've got bolt thrower. The bolt thrower and grudge thrower are both interesting. You've got the flame cannon, which I'm less a fan of. The bolt thrower actually is not bad, particularly if you've got the rune of piercing, I think it is. The goblin hewer looks cool. That's it's nice that it's been brought in. Definitely fits with if you're going for that slayer, maybe even you know, sort of a slayer themed army. That could be really cool. Not something I'm going to put in my army, but nice to see that it's in. Nice to see that it's in. I think that's great. So for me, I actually like the dwarf cannons and the organ guns and stuff like that. So flame cannon, not for me. Grudge thrower, a bit situational, but has you know, a different use. But it's the cannon and the organ gun that I really want. And then we've got the Anvil of Doom and Bugman's Cart. Well, the Anvil of Doom, that's interesting. It's immobile is the main problem. Once it goes on the tabletop, it stays in its location, but cool and a nice looking miniature. And Bugman's Cart as well. It's nice to have, again, something classical in there. So you can, what does it say here? When the throng needs an extra turn of speed, it can also turn to the non-magical, yet no less potent power of Bugman's 6X, carted around by sturdy draft ponies and distributed to nearby warriors to boost their speed. And anything you can do to boost the speed of a dwarf, that definitely helps, because they're a pretty slow army on the tabletop. So there you go, that's what is coming out in the first wave of the Dwarven release. Pretty good in terms of building the basics of an army. The battalion, not bad. You've got one of the named characters in there who looks great. You've got the Dwarf Lord with shield bearers, great. You've got a bunch of classic miniatures if that's your thing. And in terms of your core core, I should say, your sort of dwarf infantry, you've got your main ones in there. You've got your Quarrelers, Thunderers, Ironbreakers, Hammerers, all really good. The only one here that isn't mentioned that I can see is the Longbeards, which is the only other one that I want probably coming in Wave 2. But you've got most of what you would need, missing the artillery, though, that I really want, which is the cannons and organ guns. So definitely a Wave 2 needed. But overall, it looks like a solid first wave, solid first release. And the battalion, as I say, not bad and actually pretty decent, I think, for a new player. It's got no collection. That's actually not a bad starter set. Definitely fills out your core. The gyrocopters are really good. And the fact that you've got a bunch of Quarrelers in there and you've got a couple of infantry blocks in there, it's actually not a bad core set to build around with those extra things like Hammerers and Ironbreakers and so on. So overall, I think that's a pretty decent start release. Finally here, it seems to have taken an age. We knew about Dwarves quite a while ago, but it's finally here, so great to see it. And that's it. That's all for today's video. Just taking a quick look at the Dwarven first wave pre-release, which is coming up. So if you're interested in Dwarves, here it is, finally. And you can also check my Dwarven Faction Focus series out that went up a few months ago. So, and that's all based upon what's in the current Old World book. It doesn't obviously contain stuff in the Arcane Journal, which we will come back to. And currently working on a Bretonnian faction focus now the Empire one is wrapping up. You've been watching The Ghost Owl, and I'll see you all very, very soon.